This episode, I'll be giving my review and reaction to the brand new movie, Obsession. Just came out in theaters, although it did premiere in 2025. Let's get right into Obsession. I have to preface this review by saying I don't like horror movies at all, and I don't like being scared. I'm braving it out for the cast, for the viewers, and I gotta say, this was a pretty good movie, and I might be addicted to horror movies now in theaters. I thought this was an awesome movie. I think original idea. We gotta pump these movies up, you know. This movie, you know, there are the horror movies like quote unquote Sinners, right? Where Sinners isn't really a horror movie. This is a horror movie where that drive home from the theater last night had to drive about 35 minutes. You know, we don't need to talk about that part, but I was tweaking. You know, longest run or longest walk ever from my car to the door, and you know, somebody to come get me. I don't know, but I need to go back and watch another horror movie in theaters. No, but this was really good. Indy Navarrete, and I'm hopefully saying that correctly. If I'm not, sorry. She put in an all-time performance in this movie. Basically, you know, I don't know how you even grade a horror movie performance, but that was a damn good one. And I didn't even know who this girl was. I looked her up today. Turns out she was in a show of all time called 13 Reasons Why. And, you know, I watched 13 Reasons Why a long time ago, watched that last season in a day. So maybe I kind of forget what happened. That was like 5 years ago at this point, but kind of an unknown cast, unknown director. For me, I haven't seen any of these people in any of these stuff besides her and 13 Reasons Why. And this delivered. Like, I felt like this was a modern take on something that, you know, what are those types of movies? What's that one I watched? I always forget the name of it, but where like the girl's obsessed with the guy. This is a modern take on it. I thought it delivered from beginning to end. The tension in the movie is crazy. The score of the movie, you know, the music. You have the switch in the music. The good scenes, but like the scenes where there's not really like the mounting tension. You know, it's kind of just playful, calm music. And then those intense scenes, it really ratchets up. So the score really adds to this movie as well. And there are some genuine jump scares where I saw, we'll talk about it later, but I'm going for non-spoiler section right now. There was one that I saw coming. I was watching with my friend in the theater, and I said, you know, this looks ripe for a jump scare. And then the jump scare came, and I was like, you know, I exited my seat. What am I doing? Luckily, we're in the back row, so I didn't get clowned too hard. That's a note to future self, sit in the back row if you're watching a horror movie. But I don't know. I kind of like the horror movies now. I don't know if it has the same effect at home as it does in theaters, so that's why I'm recommending to go check out Obsession while it's in theaters now. And I thought this was a great movie from end to end. Like, there was no really down points in the movie. You know, I have some minor complaints. I think the main character is kind of a loser, but like, you know, maybe that is part of the themes of the movie. And if I had to like nitpick here and there, you know, there are a couple of things, blah 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 blah. But from front end to back, like, this was a great movie. I was literally like shuddering in my seat watching this one. So definitely go check this out. Actually, I don't know if it would do as well in a rewatch. Like, if I were to go watch it again in theaters right now, just because, you know, like when all the scaries are coming, and you know, there aren't just scaries of like jump scares. There's like genuine like chills of like what's going to happen in this movie. So I'm always in support of these original ideas. You know, we don't need to run back these movies from the 80s or the 90s, the 70s. We don't need to add on another movie into a franchise that no one cares about or do a remake. Why don't we give these original ideas? And I guess this is a quote-unquote indie movie. Why don't we give these original ideas some run, and definitely go check out Obsession. Anything else before I want to get into my thoughts and reactions throughout the movie? Just insane moments happen throughout this movie that, you know, are achievable but are scary, and just you go like, what's going on? Ending, I will say, is a little nuts, but it does kind of fit the movie. And I do like the themes behind this movie. I think there is something to be said for, you know, this guy who wants everything out of this girl, or wants this girl to just like him back, love him more than anyone else in the world, to use the proper term. And you get what you bargain for, you know, and we'll talk about his sort of arc in this movie that I think is actually an important one. But good themes, good music, jump scares. It's all happening in this movie. I mean, go check this out. So now we'll get into my thoughts and reactions, and then I get to my score for this movie. So starting off the movie, you know, first of all, opening weekend. Okay, I have to do a little theater rant. 30 minutes of ads, I believe, on this one, which, you know, this movie only has a runtime of an hour and 49 minutes, which is whatever, you know, it's perfect runtime for a movie, in my opinion. right from like an hour 45 to 2 hours. It's like the perfect runtime in my opinion. Some movies need longer. Oppenheimer, 3 hours. It fills the whole. I don't need to go on that right now, but opening weekend, expect to pay more and also to sit through more ads. And the ads were completely. No, some of them are all right. I think there's like maybe one movie I would add to my list that I completely forgot to add. But if you're a locked-in movie person, pressures. If you're sitting watching Obsession on opening weekend, pressure's coming out in 2 weeks. Mandalorian Grogu. I don't even think there was a Mandalorian Grogu, but like, do we need these ads for Conjuring 7 and whatever? I don't know. That's just a complaint. I think, and I want people to get back to the theaters. I want people to go out and see this movie, but can we chill with the ads? And if, don't say it starts at 10:15. Say it started at 10:45. Run your ads before. But I guess that's part of the gig, right? Is to promote the movies. I will still be attending the theater, so you don't need to play the ads in front of me. But that's just a nitpick there. Okay, now into the actual movie. Starting this movie out, it's pretty chill. They have a little back and forth. We meet our main character, Bear, short for Baron, and Ian, and they're doing a little rehearsal of if you were ever asked this girl out that you've had a crush on for a long time out, what would you do? And he's talking to this girl, and it's seeming like, oh, we're right into it because he's just talking to this girl right away. But no, they're like, don't say all that. You're pouring your heart out too much, which I thought the opening speech, like, I didn't think it was too bad, but like, as we go through the movie, it was obvious he was never actually going to say all that stuff in person. And we find out that it's not actually the girl. This girl is young enough to be like, oh, maybe it is, but she's just the waitress at the restaurant. So them doing the rehearsal with the waitress, I thought was funny in order to get him prepared to do it in real life, which there are some complications with that later on that we'll talk about for sure. I've started the movie Smile like 2 weeks ago. And with the same friend that I watched this movie with, I said, I'm not watching this movie if something happens to the cat. We're turning it off. And, I was actually interested in what was happening with Smile. I was paying attention. And then they did the cat dirty. And I was sitting in the theater, paid $20 for these tickets. And 10 minutes in the movie, the cat's already dead in this movie. Come on. Why do we have to use animals? Go see that. What's that animal one? Like the Stephen King one where they're all possessed and stuff. That's your animal movie. Pet House or something. I forget what it's called. Can't we just keep the animals out of it, please? Poor cats out there. But Bear's cat is just dead when he walks in. And, this is like, oh, this is when it's going to start. But I guess the cat just got into some Oxycontin and just died. But that was depressing, bro. Like, and that's a big part of the first half of the movie is just him being like supposed to be sad over this cat, but he's not really that sad. Save the animals, bro. Can we do horror movies without the animals dying, please? Whatever. Start this movie. Our guy Bear, he's kind of a basic simp, and we learn that pretty quickly. Looking at this friend group, you have, first of all, I have some things to say, okay? 4-person friend group, Ian, Bear, Sarah, and Nikki. Now, it goes from person to person. How you vary on this style of friend group, is it just like everyone's like silently hooking up or like out loud hooking up? But I feel like in this type of scenario, it's not just your typical group of friends, and I guess they all work together, but like, I wasn't buying that. There's got to be, especially if they do work together, there's probably some crushes in there. And, we see that with Bear and Nikki. And actually, I had my LeBron moment, and I called this. I said this. The person I watched with in theaters, you can attest to this. I said, Sarah, bro, she wants him, but he wants the other girl. It's going to be one of those love triangle things. And I was right the whole time. But, he wants Nikki from a male perspective. That's understandable. I think, Nikki was beautiful in this movie. Sarah's beautiful in different ways. She's a better person, I think. I understand where he's coming from. He doesn't really have the courage to ask a girl out. I kind of relate to that. I'm awkward. I'm nervous. I can't do that stuff. He's supposed to get her a gift because she's like, I dropped my crystal down the sink. And he's like, oh, I'll get her something as a replacement. He walks into this, like, what's that? What are those things called? Like just off things, like crystals, diamonds, all that type of stuff. And he sees a one-wish willow where if you snap it in half and make a wish, you can get whatever you want to come true. So he wants to give that to her to be like, a fun gag gift. Here's for your crystal thing. And it's like shows effort, $10, which varies on your distance there, whatever. And he sets it up so he drives her home. They have a nice back and forth convo. Thought things were seemingly going well, and straight up, I actually initially thought that Nikki liked him back as well, where they're having this like sort of deep conversation in the car, and he, parks the car. She gets out. She like goes back to his to a window, and she's like, "Hey, do you like me?" And he's like, "I just think we're friends." And this is when I was like, "All right, bro." She's giving you the door, and maybe the door would have led to a different thing than I was thinking initially, but it was right there. She was asking, and I can't speak much for myself in this regard. I'm not the greatest pursuer of everything, but when it's wide in front of you like this, come on, man, come on, man. So that pissed me off, and she was like pretty upset when he's like denies it. Pretty much, she was basically waiting for him to admit that he does like her, but he doesn't. So he's like crashing out on himself. I should have said something. So he also forgot to give her the wish thing, which he now has in his back seat. Boom, snaps that bad boy open. And he says, "I wish Nikki would love me more than anyone else in the entire world." Now, thinking about those words, I don't know if that's like as bad as the movie would make it out to be. Well, I guess undying love is like could go crazy. So maybe there is an angle for that. But right after he snaps this thing, he's still just chilling in the driveway, like right outside the driveway, which I don't know why he left. He didn't leave by this time. But after he snaps it, she has very odd behavior as she exits the house. She gets back in the car. She's like by his window. This would have already tweaked me out. There's a lot of points in this movie where I'm like, what are you doing, bro? Because I would have just ended this by now, even though, she's a smoke show and she's your dream lover. Like, it can't be that deep, right? But I digress. So he wakes up, I think they slept next to each other, didn't like have sex or anything, they just kissed, whatever. Wakes up, she's not there. He gets up, walks around, sees the house, and this is where I definitely, we're only like half an hour in at this point. This is where I definitely would have cut it off. And, back to the cat, Sandy. The cat's dead, right? The cat had Oxycontin, whatever, RIP. I feel terrible for the cat. I already spoke my piece about the cat. Why does he still have the dead body in his apartment of the cat? Like, wouldn't you want to dispose of that, bring it to the exterminator or the vet or something? I feel like you just want a dead cat carcass in your house. Like, even just everything's normal in this movie. Like, why not remove that? I don't know, but I digress. He's kind of, well, he does seem like he has a neat apartment until, things start going crazy, but he seems to be like a normal guy, just awkward. Maybe, yeah, I don't want to say that word. So he walks around the house, whatever. She made breakfast. He goes into the kitchen, and there's the cat's body on a fucking memorial. I'm out, bro. I'm sorry, I'm out. You could be Margot Robbie. You could be Megan Fox, whoever you are. There's a point where you have to be like, no, bro. Who does that? You put a cat on like a memorial, like the body? I don't know. Maybe I live in a different world and people have different beliefs in like how you should honor your pet like that. But the poor thing's dead. Now you're like parading it around on a memorial. Like, I feel like modern day that is not normal at all. But what do I know? I'd be out. I'd be done. And maybe I'm so nitpicky and whatever. I'd be out. Anyways, he's like, "Hey, you were a little bit weird last night. What was going on with that?" And he actually talks to Ian in the store. And he's like, "Remember when she took Molly before? Maybe she's on Molly." And then she runs with that. Where this is actually a great scene where him and Ian are talking in the store, and like they're in the foreground, and you can just see her in the background just staring at them the entire time. Like they have customers, they work at a music store, whatever. But if you notice, I feel like if you notice the background things going on in this movie, it just adds into the effects of it. But she's just staring at them the entire time. She calls this off or she dismisses this as being MDMA on Molly. I can't speak to that. I don't know what the effects of Molly are. I don't think he'd be doing that stuff though. But I doubt Barrett's done Molly in his life, so who knows? Essentially, things go well from here, where I don't think she ever goes back home. She just lives with Bear. They get together, they have a romantic relationship. They're sleeping together. They're doing everything together, cooking together. I forget what there was like a 4-minute montage of them just doing activities together. Things are going well. And they're out to dinner now. We see a little bit of the back and forth. She's like, what would you want to do with your life? He's like, I want to be a food critic. Which I don't know. Are these kids like supposed to be 19? Or are they just like out of college? Or I don't know like what the age group of this is, because they're all just working at a music store. Nikki had actually put in her 2 weeks before the movie, or like at the beginning of the movie. And that was the initial call when she's like, I lost my necklace down the drain. Sarah's going to college, but I don't know if she was already in college. It's confusing. Anyways, they're in the restaurant having a date, and Ian calls Bear, and Bear's got to get up. It's a smart move by Bear, where you ignore the first phone call, but if he calls twice, you got to answer that. That's a bro code 101. So he picks up the phone and walks away. Also smart. He's talking on the phone, and things get revealed. Ian's like, if she doesn't actually have cancer, bro, or her mom or her dad doesn't actually have cancer, he's fine. I checked hospitals, he's fine. I don't know if this is like she's just very out of it. She might be taking advantage of you, which is a thing that gets run with a lot throughout the back half of this movie. But you see Nikki emerge from her seat, and she's watching this whole thing. So more of her just watching in the background. And he brings this up to her at the dinner table, like, hey, can we talk about your dad? And she's like, no, 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 no. She's like screaming, making a scene. And you can't bring this woman in public, too, after we see the party scene later on. But, huge scene at the restaurant. No one really cares around them, these NPCs. But later that night, in bed, she's doing very weird things. She gets up and is just in the corner. And that kind of tweaked out my friend a little bit. That tweaked him out more than it tweaked me out. I didn't even see her. A lot of darkness in this movie where, like, you can't see her eyes, you can't see her full body. She's just kind of in the dark. I think they kind of play into that aspect of it, obviously being a horror movie. But she's in the corner. She's like, I like watching you sleep. Very odd stuff. You can watch him from right next to him. Why do you gotta be in the corner standing up? That's some creepy shit. He wakes up in the morning. I don't know how he's still in this thing, man. The front door is duct taped shut, and he just acts like everything's normal. Like, this is the guy who doesn't stand up for himself in any capacity. He just, like, lets life hit him and is like, I'm fine with this. Like, she can't be that good of, like, it can't be that good, brother, I hate to say it. But the front door is duct taped shut, front to top to bottom, side to side, taped shut. Duct tape all over. What are we doing, bro? Why would you stay here? He's an idiot. But she made him lunch, thankfully, which definitely won't be something awful. So she's like, hey, if it's too hard to get the door, you can just stay here all day. Come on, be less obvious, lady. She makes him a lunch. He's eating lunch, talking to Sarah, and, the clues have been there this whole time that Sarah's, more into him than Nikki, whatever, right? And he's got this lunch where she packed like 3 pictures of them together, and it's like, you're my boo. Like, you can finally be a food critic. What's your opinion on this food? Cat. First of all, this guy doesn't dispose of the cat's body. Second of all, she makes a memorial of it in the house. And now third of all, she's cooking it. These poor animals. This poor Sandy the cat, dude. Sandy the cat went through it, this movie. And this is where I was saying again, how good could this possibly be? I'd be done here. You have to be done. You have to look at yourself in the mirror and, maybe Ian's not as good of a friend as he should have been like, yo, intervention type shit. Like, it doesn't seem like Bear really has. We don't really know what his parents are like. We don't know who else he has in his group besides like these 3 friends from work, and his boss, who like is Sarah's dad, but like doesn't really care about him seemingly. How good could it be, man? How good could it be? Oh, sandwich made a cat. Jesus, that alone is horrid in and of itself. So finally, he realizes, maybe I should try and reverse this wish. He's going crazy, and she's a psychotic person. And he calls the number on the back of the wish box. And of course, this is actually, I'm reading some stuff about this movie. The person on the line, he was actually the director of the movie, which is a fun cameo. But essentially, as you'd expect, any customer service is useless in 2026. And I think that's pretty fair and pretty accurate. You know, they're like, you can reverse it, but one of you has to die. And then he goes home. It's tough. It's tough talking about this. So I forgot to mention when he left the house, you know, door duct taped, that's fine, cat for lunch, whatever. She's standing there, right? And as he shuts the door, we see her just still standing there. He comes back, she's still standing there in the exact same position. And what does that mean? You know, well, first of all, actually, before he even, right when he leaves, we see pee dripping out of her. This is awful. And so he comes back home and she's got like something on her chin, bodily fluids everywhere. There's poop on the ground. She's like, I'll clean it up. Bro, like, end this. You know, and I think there's points where you're supposed to feel bad for Bear, but after you get through the duration of the movie, you're like, I don't care about Bear, bro. I want, you know, we're rooting for the Nikki that's trapped inside this possessed Nikki. But I would wrap it up. But, you know, I'm, like I said, I would wrap this up. Like, this movie wouldn't even happen in my scenario. I would just been like, this is over, lady. And then if she did something, police, emergency services, you know, psych eval, something. I'd do something. I'd figure out the wish thing. Whatever. I'm not in this movie. It's Bear. So I gotta, you know, Ian. He's not even like that big of a character in the story, but he's pretty complicated, just due to his past relations and like his. He is, I think, a good friend. That's up for debate, though. Like I think he has good and bad points. I do think one of his good points is being like, "Yo, this is a boys' night. Like, if you're chill, like if she's really chill with you, you can come without her." Um, but it's also like bad because Sarah tells Nikki like we're going to this house party, right? So it's kind of like a double-edged sword there, where like if that didn't happen, I wonder what would have happened. But she's in the shower cleaning off from shitting herself and pissing herself from standing still all day. He's like, "Hey, I'm just gonna go to Ian's tonight. We're having a boys' night." And she's like, her screams are terrible, bro. But I think Ian had good intentions here. Like that's a nice thing to do. Like, you know, detach from the ball and chain type beat, whatever. And essentially, she has to come because she knows Sarah's going. And Bear's like a pushover, so he brings her. Whatever. They're playing this Jenga game, which I haven't seen this Jenga game of like you stack the Jengas and you take one and then you look at your block. Whatever. She reads out some really weird Hansel and Gretel shit on her block. I don't know. She was like, now I don't have to drink. I don't know what that was even. What was the block even? You know, who knows? Well, first, someone gets a block to shift her seat. So they're broken apart. She's like, nah. Yeah, she like makes a face, whatever. Doesn't do anything too dramatic. It's Bear's turn to draw a block. And of course, he gets the block to kiss the person to the left. And it's Sarah. What could have been, you know? And I thought, you know, something crazy is going to happen, but nothing too crazy. Probably like a 6 out of 10 crazy. Nikki gets up, pulls her chair all the way back, and kisses him. You know, I think that's pretty fair to, like, no one should have actually made Bear kiss Sarah in front of his girlfriend Nikki right there. Like, in a normal scenario, that wouldn't have happened. So that's fine, whatever. Then Nikki starts going crazy. You know, she was laughing a little bit too loud. Kind of reminded me of that scene from Love Liza. Whatever, right? But then we get, I think, you know, I was missing this aspect of the movie of the real Nikki being trapped inside of this raging Nikki. The real Nikki wakes up and has the bottle and just stabs herself in the head. What a scene in front of the Ian's house party, people. Crazy. And, you know, she stabs herself in the head a lot, and we'll talk. Yeah. She's stabbing herself in the head. You know, seemingly they go to the hospital. It's kind of like a muted scene. They don't really know what's going on. But for my friend in the theater, you can't be admitted to the hospital without your own voluntary need, whatever. So she just gets out of it. Of stabbing herself in the head. She's like, I'll be all right. And they reconcile at home. They're sleeping next to each other, whatever. Everything's back to normal because Bear's an idiot and a pushover. Bear gets some buzzing on his phone, which, you know, people have their phone vibrating and making noise in the middle of the night. God bless you, because group chats and stuff pop off. My phone's on silent. My phone doesn't even vibrate in the day. But, and they all have Androids or something. You know, they all have some like Nokia shits, whatever. Sarah texts him at like 3 in the morning. I knew it. I called it, whatever, had my LeBron moment, we need to go over that again. But she's like, there's some things I need to tell you. And she's like, if you don't come to this park, I'm coming over to your house. And, you can't have that duct tape door, probably cooked cat somewhere, blood everywhere, shit on the ground. Can't have that. He has to sneak out. And this is the saddest, I think, overall part of the movie, where the real Nikki wakes up when, like, this possessed Nikki is sleeping, and he's walking out of the apartment to go see Sarah in the park. And the real Nikki's like, please, Bear, kill me. Like, I can't stand this. Like, I'm trapped. I'm possessed. Please just kill me. End this. And he's like, so you don't want to be in a relationship with me? It's that bad? Dude has no, like, empathy, bro. And this was the scene that turned me on Bear, where I was like, you did this, and you got what you wanted. She's crazy. And the real Nikki, this isn't even the real Nikki. You've been with a fake Nikki this whole entire time. But he's not going to do anything about it because he's an idiot. And, I digress. So he goes and meets Sarah, gets in her car. I guess she, like, comes here to smoke weed at 3 a.m. I would not do that, especially, I think they're in Chicago. Like, I think that's a bad idea to do that in a city. I mean, it's a bad idea to do that anywhere, really. Smoke weed yourself. Smoke weed by yourself at 3 a.m. I don't know. Well, actually, you can do that in your own domicile, but going out in the public, in a park, especially, wouldn't do that, Sarah, but who knows? Now, this is the scene I was talking about earlier. Okay. Listen, I'm a rookie to horror movies. The horror movies I watch are like Quiet Place and Sinners, right? Not really like horror movies. And as they're having this conversation, I'm like, should have been with Sarah this whole time. Sarah's a better match. Nikki's like a little bit all over the place, does Molly, like tweaks, whatever. Sarah actually tells him, I actually should get this important information out. Sarah tells him that Ian was actually hooking up with Nikki this, like, for a couple months casually for years, and he thinks that Nikki's going with Bear to get back at Ian for some shit. So that was like the whole narrative by Ian, which scumbag move by Ian, just like promoting him to ask her out when he knows she's gonna say no. But then again, maybe you need like that rejection. I don't know. Whatever, right? I knew it when they were talking. I said, Sarah's the one. Should have been this whole time. Something fucked up's going to happen. I know it. The window, there's like just enough fog around the window where there's like, this is the window and like this part's fogged up, but there's like this wide open middle. I'm like, that I literally said to my friend, that window is ripe. I said those words, but nothing could have prepared me for when Nikki sprints in, like one of those videos of like people sprinting from like 100 yards away, like some clown shit, like the clown in the middle of the woods. She sprints to the window, breaks the window. I was out of my seat. I don't think I've had that happen in theaters. I ejected myself from the seat. I own it, hand up. I own that. It scared the shit out of me. I don't know what happened. Oh man, the theater experience, right? So after that happened, she's demonically smashing her head against a brick over and over and over. You guys like these movies? Collect yourself. So, right as things are going well, Sarah was like, you should have kissed me because I was to your left. Obviously, was digging him this whole time. Clues were there, whatever. But now her head is smashed to bits and she's dead. And, going through this movie, you had the expectation that, like, at least Sarah and Ian were not making, or at least Sarah was not making out of this. Ian maybe had a chance. But one of the friends had to die. Like, she was going to go on a killing streak. So they go to, the scenes that follow this are very confusing, where like they go to get rid of the body, whatever. I don't know what's going on. Ian lets her go home. Or not Ian, Bear lets her go home. He finally has a moment of realization, maybe something's off here. You think, buddy? You think? Idiot, bro, idiot. And then he buys another one of these wish things. He walks in, bloody shirt, This guy was funny though in the store. The second clerk who's like, "You're fucked, bud." Like that guy was funny in the conversation where Bear's like trying to get out of the wish again. He gets another wish bone. He can't break it. Tries against the steering wheel. Tries with his hands. It's one of those mythical things. Only one person can break it. So he brings it to Ian, and Ian's like, "Poo-poo, like you're just bullshitting, bro. You're covered in blood. I don't believe you." Ian. Let me know if you watch this movie. Let me know down below in the comments if you think Ian's a good guy. I don't think so. I think he's kind of a scum. But he's like making fun of him. He's like, "Oh, really? If I break this, I'll get $1 billion." And then he breaks it, and money just starts pouring in from the ceiling. So that was really fun. And Bear, you can see the look on Bear's face. I'm just like distraught. Like he lost it. This is over. There's no chance of getting back to normal. And we're in hell now. When Bear gets back to the apartment, Nikki's wearing Sarah's clothes. A disgusting image of her body posted up on a chair, which I thought you were supposed to dispose of the body. But I guess in this apartment, we just leave cat bodies out. And we leave dead woman bodies out. Naked, gross stuff. And they're arguing a little bit back and forth. Ian knocks on the door. He can't come in. He's like, Bear's like, "I'll come out in a second. Ian finally barges in, just... boom, as Leon Edwards would say, headshot, you're dead. There goes Ian, like just like that, because Nikki's like that chick in the meme, like boom with the gun, like but she actually was about to shoot herself. Bear's like, don't do that. And then Ian faces the music, which I don't care about Ian, scum, as I just mentioned. So then we get to the real final conclusion of this movie. Bear's like, "I gotta go freshen up and we'll just do everything normal." Like, I think he's come to the realization finally, after an hour and 49 minutes, pretty much, that this bitch is crazy. After he just watched her kill two of his only two other friends and only two other people we really know their names in this movie. He goes to look himself in the mirror. First, he goes for the chest shot with the gun, which I don't know if that would have just been hell, because he wouldn't have killed himself, and then like Nikki would have saved him somehow. Then he goes for in the mouth, under the chin. Ultimately, he can't do it with the gun. Takes the Oxycontin instead, and then you hear the little music in the background. The wish. I picked up on this. I think this is a really well detailed movie because there are some background stuff that happens that you need to be paying attention. But you can hear the little wish music in the back. Nikki had actually used the wish, but Bear's taking Oxycontin, and then he regrets it. He's like, he's trying to make himself uke, but it's too late because now he's possessed to love her as much as she loves him. I think that's the wish that Nikki made, and they're making out. He's robotic, and who knows what would have happened in the world if these. I think actually it would have just been better if these two just loved each other like infinitely, and then that's it. That they probably wouldn't bother anyone. They'd never leave the house. They'd probably just die from probably not die, but like. They just love each other as much as they love you. Like there wouldn't even be an imbalance. It would just be it. It'd be endgame, which that could have been a real scary scenario. Not really for like people, but who knows? But it's too late. When they're kissing and being in love, he had already taken the Oxycontin, and he's dying, and he's dead. He's foaming his mouth, and Nikki's like, "No, I'm gonna kill myself now with the gun." But the problem is when Bear dies. Nikki wakes up to her original version because Bear is now dead, so the wish can no longer continue. So now regular Nikki wakes up to Bear dead in her arms, Ian dead at the door, Sarah filleted, sitting there. And that's what we deal with as, she's just screaming as the movie goes to credits. Bravo, this movie was fucking insane. I loved it. Some are saying the horror genre is back. I'm in, tag me in, guys. I was rebelling against these horror movies, but the theater experience was awesome. Back left corner, I'm slouching down in my seat. I'm ejecting from my seat. I'm going like this, this was great. It was a high of this movie. So overall, I'm giving this movie an 8.5. Support original ideas. This was awesome. And definitely check this out in theaters while you can. I'd recommend this to anyone, even if you don't like horror movies. This may be the one that pushes you over the edge. Like pushed me over the edge. Really, really awesome movie. 8.5 for Obsession. 2026, we're off to a great start. So, where does this 8.5 compare to the other movies reviewed so far on the channel? This is the number 14 movie of the 106 movies reviewed over 2 years and 1 month. So if that's not an endorsement enough, who knows? And this movie is getting good reviews online. That's why I wanted to see it, because, sometimes I'll have the crowds fraud check movies. Like, I wasn't actually going to see this movie, but then I got saw it was getting some hype. I was like, I'll go check it out myself. Delivered. Number 14 of 106 movies tied so far are reviewed so far. This does tie Black Swan and Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse at an 8.5. I would take this movie over Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, but I'm still taking Black Swan over this movie. I think Black Swan's pretty similar. This one's just more horror-based. Black Swan's more like theory-based. I don't know. But, splitting hairs here. We're all at 8.5s. This does beat out The Devil's Advocate, which is an 8.3. We've had 2 supernatural horror movies. This is now the new best supernatural horror movies. And of the 4 movies reviewed so far that I've seen in theaters in 2026, this is number 2. Project Hail Mary, I gave a 9.4. All-timer right there, that's tough to beat. But this beats out Peaky Blinders, Mortal Man, which I gave an 8.4, and Sent Help, which I gave a 7.4. So everything's above 7 so far in 2026. Hopefully we keep that momentum going. I have a feeling, based on the early reviews for Mandalorian and Grogu, and who knows how pressure will be, but I gotta get to the theater more, theater boosted up. But great time watching Obsession. Glad I went. You guys should go too. Can't say enough positive things. This is actually the longest review I've had in a while for a movie. So feels good to get all that off my chest because I knew I had a lot to say about this movie. If there's anything I missed, let me know down below in the comments. What were your thoughts if you saw it? If you made it all the way through this movie, you must have seen it as well. Opening weekend review from the Dubcast. So if that's not telling you we're clocked in, baby. It's going to be a big couple months. 2026 is my year. Come on now. Subscribe, like, comment, do everything. What's coming up? So we have more movie reviews coming up. Shot Caller will be next. Can't guarantee I'll get out to the theater. I got some vacations coming up soon, so who knows what's in store with that, but just expect consistent movie reviews in general. NBA playoffs. We got to do a stream probably tomorrow night for conference finals and second round recap, UFC numbered events. And in terms of shows, we got Survivor 50 finale on Wednesday. Been having a great time talking about Survivor as well. And House of the Dragon back in June, Silo back in July. A ton of stuff just got added in the last week, which is fucked up. The Walking Dead, Dead City. That might be a short type thing if I really stick to it. Who knows? Ted Lasso. What is there to talk about? Ted Lasso. There's something else. Oh, Quarterback. I don't know. Maybe these are shorter videos, but it's all happening here. So I'd love if you subscribe, like, comment. I said it all before. Social media. TikTok's taken off. I do different style of videos, so shorter term content for movie reviews, TV shows, maybe some stuff I wouldn't post on the full channel, so make sure to check that out as well. I'll leave y'all with that. Check out this movie for me, all right? And as always, be easy, y'all.